Hello, good evening and welcome to The Majority Show. My name is Mark Devlin. This is Scotland's #1 politics and chat show, going out live on Facebook, Twitter and YouTube every Wednesday, 7 p.m. And we are glad to have you with us. I'm also here with my co-hosts, Mary Devlin and Mark Zegveldt.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Mary, what are you going to be talking about tonight?
Well, tonight I'm going to be talking about how Scottish homeowners are at boiling point. We've got Patrick Harvie's plans to ban gas boilers, and Scotland's council taxes are a rip-off.
Well, that is very true. And Mark, what are you going to be talking about
I'm
today?
going to talk about the Scottish Labour Party and the stance on the GRR bill and the attack on Starmer.
Right, okay. And we'll all be asking why are the Scottish Tories trying so hard to be on the same side as SNP when it comes to devolution?
And of course, we have Zoomer of the Week.
Yes, highlight. And we're back with all that and more in just a moment. Good, great. Welcome back to The Majority Show, Scotland's #1 politics and chat. And hello from everyone who is coming in through the chat right now. I'm here tonight. I'm the host, Mark Devlin. I'm here tonight with my co-host, Mary Devlin and Mark Zegveldt, who many of you will know from Twitter. Mark, it's been a couple of weeks since you've been on. What have you been up to?
Did a really good space with Anne-Marie on the drug issues.
Anne-Marie Ward.
Yeah, and it was the biggest space I've done so far. So that was a really good one. And then just spending time with family.
Right.
Lovely.
Okay. Well, that's nice. A shame the weather isn't better, really.
Yeah.
At the moment, it continues.
Could be worse.
Could be. What's about the spaces? These Twitter spaces? Can you tell us a little bit more about those?
Yeah. What we've been doing is I do a regular one on a Thursday night, and I've been getting regular guests on from different political views, and I record them now and put them onto my Twitter line, and they've become the last one got over 600 views on the show. So it's
that's pretty good. But they're they are quite long though and in depth. It's a bit more. We try to go through the issues, fairly speedily. But on the Twitter Spaces, you can get a bit more depth into it, can't you?
Yeah, we can do them up to about 4 or 5 hours sometimes.
Right.
Wow.
So we do get, depending on who comes on, but they are quite popular now. I think they're getting a lot more people coming in and a lot more people interested. So I'm hoping to get a lot more guests to come on.
Right. Okay. Well, I think to mention some of those guests is that they can come on this show as well if they want to. We are happy to talk to anyone here. We talked to Anne-Marie Ward. We've talked to other people from the various political parties on the show. If they're up for it, that's fine. Some show stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, you can get a shout out with a super thanks or super sticker donation. As a wee button there, please have a look at that. And if you're not on YouTube, please go to the Majority site where you can pledge a monthly or one-time donation. Everything is used to support the show and to support our efforts against toxic nationalism.
And sharing is caring. So wherever you are, please like, share, comment, tell your friends, extend our reach at the click of a button.
And as usual, a huge thanks to our friends at UK Union Voice and United Against Separation Facebook pages, where many of you are watching from tonight.
And as usual, I'll be handling all the comments. So please make them short and snappy, and we'll try to get as many up on screen as we can. Thank you.
Right. We have a lot of things to talk about in the show today. We look forward to all your comments. That'll be great. So we'll be back in a second to discuss them. Right, so in a few minutes, we're going to be talking about Labour's confusion on gender recognition and trying to boil Patrick Harvie. No, that's not quite right. Boilers and Patrick Harvie. But first, I saw a thing today, an interesting poll in the Times, talking about devolution. Now, if you remember, a few months back, Lord Frost said that UK should start to roll back the devolved powers and that the Scottish Parliament had too many here. This is the thing here. Well, this isn't actually the original thing. This was what came out today. The poll said that, poll done by Survation, said that 22% of Scots felt there was a good balance between the powers of the Scottish and Westminster parliaments. 51% said that Scottish Parliament should have more powers, God help us all. And 17% said it should have less, which is a 34% difference, which would need a swing of 17% to get to parity. So, in that issue, there's work to be done. I think we've said in the show before, I believe a concerted campaign that starts in the position that devolution has failed, that Holyrood should be abolished and a better replacement should be enacted. We could increase those numbers over time. And really, we should be starting to make use of the lazy Westminster MPs. But anyway, notably, 33% of Conservative respondents said they believe Holyrood should be abolished, and 17% think it should have less power, so basically 50%. Yet, the Scottish Tory Party never mentions this. In fact, they go the other way and try to appease nationalists by giving more power to them at every turn. So, Mary, any thoughts on that?
Well, we've been watching the Conservatives for quite a long time now, haven't we?
Yeah, so certainly.
And we're not very happy. They just seem to be very wishy-washy, softly. I think they think that if they if they make everything kind of wishy-washy, then Scottish voters might be more likely to vote for them. In other words, if they're less conservative.
Yeah, this is a problem. I think this is definitely a problem. Mark, you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just don't think devolution hasn't worked. It's as simple as that. Devolution hasn't worked, and the Conservatives, for some reason, I just think that they're scared of losing, of upsetting the nationalists by attacking devolution. But
right, isn't that the point? The point is that they should be attacking nationalists on everything, right? So
exactly, they should. But what we see with Scottish Parliament is Conservatives attacking Labour and Labour attacking Conservatives, rather than attacking the SNP, who have made an absolute mess of devolution. They really have. They've used devolution to attack Westminster, and they're pushing through policies that nobody wants. And there's no checks and balances in the devolution at all. And it just seems to be it's an absolute mess, and it really needs looked at. Even if it's not going to be scrapped, it needs looked at, and it needs re-examining.
Yeah. Well, it's been 25 years since devolution was enacted, so you think that this could be an appropriate time to have a review. We should be looking at what's working and what's not working.
Well, I think that's the basic part. Remember that famous ad, Labour isn't working, the Conservatives ran before, devolution isn't working. But as Mark says, they're definitely too scared. And it makes you wonder a little bit, well, what does it take to become a Conservative MP or politician in Scotland? And the party is so scared of nationalists that they'll put up the weakest candidates, the least conservative candidates, it seems to be. So that means we get, and then of course the nationalists roll right over them. We had this ridiculous Smith Commission thing, the vow, first of all, the Smith Commission, all this giving extra power to nationalists, and what good did any of that do? Didn't do any good at all, didn't stop them at all. They just kept on with their agitation, and they'll never stop their agitation until we say no, and we need the people in the Parliament. 33% or 50% actually, basically, of Scottish Conservatives don't want devolution. Many of them never voted it for in the first place. And yet not a single one of the representatives will even mention it. I think that's really...
It goes back to the point of they're not listening to what we want and what we say.
Absolutely.
The politicians, there's never been a bigger divide between the general public and politicians. They really don't understand the feeling out there, and they're just not listening.
Yeah, they're definitely not listening. Well, beginning to listen perhaps, but it's a bit late, certainly in the case of the Conservative Party. Mary, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't think, people seem to talk about devolution as if it was somehow set in stone.
Yes.
But, it's really not. It's that we can change it. It could all be changed.
Yes.
We can change it a little, we can change it a lot, we can get rid of Holyrood, we can do all of those things. But people seem to say, oh, well, we've got it, and, there's nothing we can do about it now.
Well, I like to say to people, well, what about the EU? Did you ever think that we would get out of the EU? Many people didn't want to go in the EU. The EU was not working for many voters, and eventually, what happened through a concerted effort, the UK left. And you might think that was a disaster, might not, but nonetheless, it was possible to change the political systems in a country, and with effort. And I think that's the thing here. But here, this Adam Morris, who commissioned the poll and who's head of media for the Scottish Conservatives, said that all Lord Frost achieved with his comments about rolling back devolution was to give the nationalists more constitutional ammunition when they were otherwise struggling. I knew his views weren't shared by Scottish Conservative politicians. Now the research shows they're not shared by the overwhelming majority of Scots either. Well, you notice how he says that? He doesn't say they're not held by the overwhelming majority of Scottish Tory voters. Right. So, he doesn't. He says that they are actually held by the majority of Scots Tory voters. So basically, he's got zero evidence here that it's given the SNP constitutional ammunition. And we've just been going on since the beginning about Morris and about these people in the party who are really seem to be dead set against their membership. And they were first to stick the knife into Boris. They hate Brexit. They didn't want Boris to come to Scotland ever. And now they're working along the SNP to defend the disastrous Scottish devolution.
But Douglas Ross is just a weak leader. I've never thought he's a great politician at all, but he is a very poor, in my opinion, he's a very poor leader, and he's too concerned with Labour than he is with the SNP.
Well, I don't think he's that concerned with anything, really. I'm going to talk a little bit later about the difference between conviction politicians and pragmatic politicians, maybe in the next segment. But it just seems they don't have any conviction whatsoever and not have any ability to deal with the issues at hand that are around us. So a big disconnect between what their actual voters want. Imagine saying that, commissioning a poll to bolster the idea that Scottish people in general are against the position of your own voters. It's absolute insanity. So, what you should be doing, you should be saying, yes, look, we've got a core group here, 33%, who are, think this is not working at all. Let's actually listen to them. That's what the thing should be about.
But they just don't listen. They are not listening at all. And it goes to it as well. There's no checks and balances in Parliament, in Scottish Parliament. The ministers can lie in Parliament and they don't have to come and correct it. Even if it's corrected by another politician, they don't have to come back like they do at Westminster. They don't have to come back and correct the record. It's up to them. That can't be right. You can't have ministers. How can you trust what anyone says if they can lie and it doesn't have to be corrected?
No. There's no comeback. Yeah.
No, it's not good. I mean, checks and the system itself, we can talk about. I think actually, it doesn't matter. I think a conversation has to be started to say, is this working for us? And the end point could be abolishing Holyrood, but it could be anywhere to abolishing Holyrood. And that doesn't mean to go back to Westminster control. And that's another thing that happened in this poll. They're basically saying that's the options. It's abandon devolution or go back to Westminster control. Well, wait a minute. There's lots of other things in the middle there. Would you like local authorities to have more power? Would you like to have our lazy Westminster MPs doing more work? And so on, right? So there's a lot of options in there. So that my point is to actually start a conversation on this.
Well, they did say they could bypass the Parliament with funding for the local councils. And I don't know what happened to that.
No, some of that's been going on. They've been doing some funding for that as well. But I mean, it's like a Band-Aid. That's not really doing that much. So everyone knows, this is the thing. It's one of these things, isn't it? Everyone knows devolution is a disaster. On our side, we know it's a disaster. And the SNP don't want it either. They just want independence, right? So nobody wants it. That's the thing. Nobody actually wants it.
The Conservatives seem to want it.
Well, the Conservatives, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So it's no surprise they're losing support. I mean, basically, people, you see these, actually, this is an interesting point. You see these, how people didn't turn out, Tories didn't turn out because of the ULEZ and because of stuff like that. That's exactly what's going to happen here. Tories are just going to say, nah, I'm not interested in these people. They're so out of touch with what their actual voters want. And if the voters want some conviction, to actually fight on ideological grounds, and they're just not getting it. So they deserve everything they get.
Well, I think one of the major changes I'd like to see is to get rid of the legislative powers of the Scottish Parliament. I mean, they just make such a mess of it. So, you just have to look at the DRS or the GRR bills and look at those. They don't know how to put together good laws.
Well, it doesn't matter anyway, because basically if the law's bad, well, then they just say, oh, it punts up to Westminster. Westminster says this is a bad law. And then they go, well, okay, we've got the constitutional conflict.
Well, then they use it as a grievance against Westminster.
So it's no good, and it would just be worse. And actually, we've got some articles on the website by Stephen Bailey, who has gone into the devolution disaster in detail, and also federalism and other solutions. And we need to actually have, as I say, a proper conversation about this that includes the Scottish Conservative Party. That's the thing. We need to be represented. And that means the Conservatives, but also people in Labour need to be talking about devolution as well. And people in Lib Dems need to be talking about it. It's not a sacred cow. It needs to be overhauled at a very minimum.
I do like what George Folks is doing now.
Yes, that's true.
In Parliament. I think he's attacked it really well. But they are hitting him hard at the moment on Twitter. They're really attacking him. Holmes has attacked him, and there's quite a few now attacking him.
Yeah, but generally a paper tiger. What power do they have? They don't have any real power. What are they going to do? They're going to if the UK government started rolling back devolution laws right now, what's going to happen? It's really going to be a big resurgence. Everyone's going to go over to Alba. I don't think so. Anyway, moving on. On this beautiful rainy Scottish summer evening, show everyone what you stand for with this amazing Abolish Holyrood T-shirt or a mug or a mouse mat. A portion from every sale goes to supporting our work at the Majority. We'll be back in a few seconds to talk about Scottish Labour's gender confusion. Are they in or are they out? What are they? This is the question of the moment. Right, Mark, actually, this is your section.
Yeah, it's got me so frustrated and so angry at the moment with the Labour Party in Scotland. I really don't know where they're at. They're attacking Starmer because Starmer realises that he can't win the election with by backing the GRR bill, especially as it is at the moment. So he's backtracked a bit on and had a little go at the Scottish Parliament for their legislation that they're trying to get through. Now, Scottish Labour have come back and attacked Starmer and have doubled down on their backing of the GRR bill, and they're saying it's because they pushed it through, they've got it through Parliament, that Scotland back it. Well, they don't.
No, it's not.
Well, it's not backed at all.
That's nonsense. I mean, they should have actually held to their principles. There was a whole point in that where they were proposing amendments, right? And they were saying all these amendments, and a lot of them were just common sense amendments, and those amendments were rejected. At that point, they should have walked away from it and said, "No, this is not right." But they went ahead anyway. Well, and this is where we're at in this mess now.
My annoyance is that the SNP are on their knees. They really are, as a party, and in the polling, they're really on the knees. And if you're ever going to beat the SNP, it's going to be now. And Labour have just shot themselves in the foot completely. They've upset 50% of the population, the women, by backing this GRR bill. They've upset quite a lot of people because they're not listening to what the anger out there. They think they're Scotland backing in this, but they're not backing them, and they're not listening to people. They've stopped listening. It's like what we were saying before. They've stopped listening. These parties, they don't listen to anybody.
Well,
And
yeah.
it
Actually, I
could
think
cost them. It really
Yeah,
could
I think it's
cost
quite
them.
interesting because I think one thing you can say for Starmer is that he kind of listens, right? I was going to say, talking about this earlier, that with Mary actually, and there's like I think two kinds of politicians, perhaps. I don't know. But one side of the conviction politicians are like, they work from first principles, like Margaret Thatcher, small business, small government, all that type of thing. This is what we were going to go ahead. Individuality, for example. And then there are the pragmatic politicians who, for them, perhaps, their conviction, their ideology isn't quite as strong, but they want to solve problems, perhaps, and at least want to listen to the voters a bit. And I think to some extent Keir Starmer is doing that part. I don't think he's got much conviction at all.
No, but what he does realise, and what he's doing, is the political game of, and he's been told, if you carry on back in the GRR bill like you are, you're going to lose the next general election.
Yes, that's right.
And he knows that.
That's right.
And that's why he's backtracking now. But Scottish Labour aren't playing the politics. They could win the next election by just being quiet.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's a good opportunity for them to be quiet.
Yeah.
As the expression goes, they could just shut their mouths and say, look, this is a done issue. First of all, objective is to win the general election. And to win the general election, we need to win in Scotland as well. Right? That's the objective. You want to win the general election. Can't make any changes otherwise. And what they're proposing, Labour, is saying, look, we'll look at it. Okay, and we'll kind of do some look at it. It's not like they closed the door to the whole thing. So basically, they're saying that. But why are these Scottish Labour MPs talking up? Why can't Anna Sauer tell them to shut up? It's like, because it's annoying women, it's annoying Conservatives who may lend them their vote as well. And
all he needed to do is put out a statement and say, we've listened to Keir Starmer, we understand his frustration and his points, and we're going to look at it. That's all he needed to say. And it would have been, that would have been fine. But no, instead, they attacked Starmer and doubled down on it and said,
I know, it's crazy.
It doesn't make political sense. It really doesn't. And it really could cost them at the next election. It really could.
Yeah, Grumpy.
Because I think it's going to be a big point at the next election. I think. Yeah,
Grumpy is agreeing with you, Mark. He's saying this rowing among themselves is what the SNP will feed off. It's the last thing we need, isn't it? Is them all fighting with each other, among themselves.
It seems very unnecessary, and I don't know why it's really come to the point. Because basically, of all the people, Scottish Labour should have been able to see. There, look, this is what happened with Sturgeon. Sturgeon had to resign because of it. It's not rocket science.
No.
Sturgeon had to resign because she couldn't stand up there and say you let a man into a women's prison. That's
not just happened. A man, a rapist.
Actually, yes, that's correct. A male rapist into a women's prison. I shouldn't really need to say male rapist anyway. And that's what brought her down. Starmer doesn't want to go anywhere near that. So why on earth would Scottish Labour drag that all up again? It's utter insanity. Mark,
to me it just doesn't make any political sense whatsoever. It's like they don't want to win the next election. Are they happy being in the opposition? I really don't know, because it confuses me.
But it's also just the same thing as what I was saying earlier. Now they're actually promoting an SNP proposition. They're working with the SNP. That's what the SNP wanted, and the Greens, I should say, as well. So what's going on here? Now they might have some younger people in there, or they might have some trans-friendly people there, but that's a small amount compared with the majority. And one thing I was talking about before, and it's been in the show a little bit, is this idea that as a party becomes bigger, it has to be less extreme. And what's one of the problems we have here in Scotland is that the Greens have been a small party of extremists have been allowed into government. And so we've getting all these extreme laws in Scotland. And actually we should look at this and say this gender reform thing is actually quite extreme. So
it's a bad bill.
It's a bad bill. It's a bad bill. So, so a large party should be able to say, no, we're not going to deal with this extremism here. We're going to deal with this in a more nuanced way. And I think Starmer, actually, for all his faults, as it were, is doing that here. But another thing to consider, perhaps, is considering the Golden Bridge. will this stop SNP voters going back to Labour? And this is actually maybe a more important question, because the Golden Bridge is the proposition that Labour have to create a golden bridge to get nationalists back. So they have to not put anything in their way, except for the one thing. The nationalists only need to make one decision, which is, I'm not going to have had enough of following the SNP. That's it. And I want to win in Westminster, right? So, but does this mean that would this policy put off SNP voters who are thinking going back to Labour? Now, I think that most of those who are pushing back on trans agenda have already gone to Alba.
Yeah, they're against the GRO bill.
So they're very against it, but they're hardcore nationalists as well. So the people in the middle, soft yeses, maybe they don't think this is such a big issue. Perhaps you think, Mark?
I think it is a big issue because if you, I've seen myself, and I know from what I'm being told that there's a lot of women that will not vote Labour because of this issue.
Right. Well, those SNP women? This is the question, right?
No, I think it's Labour women as well. I think it's just women in general. In
right.
Scotland.
Okay.
And I think they feel politically homeless. That's the phrase I keep hearing.
Yes.
Political homeless. I can't tackle Labour.
We need to make a giant politically homeless.
A lot of us are in that boat.
We need to make a giant politically homeless shelter we can all go to. This, the majority, perhaps, is that place. Anyway, the majority of us perhaps feeling like that what parties are representing us, and with this disconnect between what the parties want. Now, I have to say that Labour is, Starmer is actually saying one thing. The problem here is the Scottish people and Scottish MSPs and so on. And you get Labour in, but if their policy, in a few years, perhaps is not going to be an issue for them. But you're right. I mean, I suppose it does affect people because there's like, well, I'm voting for Labour, and there's some confusion on this issue. Just to talk about that a little bit. The problem is, as we know, the issue is about gender recognition certificates and require for them for self-ID.
Yes.
And should people who are identify as transgender be able to get their own gender recognition without a medical diagnosis? And Annalise Dawes, who is the Shadow Secretary for Women Equalities, said a medical diagnosis upholds legitimacy of applications and confidence in the system, which I think is reasonable. Starmer also said, we don't think that self-identification is the right way forward. We reflected on what happened in Scotland. We set out that we want to modernise the process, get rid of some of the indignities in the process, keep it a medical process. We've always said, and I continue to say, that there should be safe spaces for women, particularly in relation to violence against women and girls.
Well, that all sounds very sensible, doesn't it?
Well, it does seem quite sensible. When I don't understand why the Scottish MSPs are sticking their oar in it and trying to ruin it. They really need to be, it's party policy and at the top, and it needs to be goes all the way down. And it wouldn't be so bad. I mean, you could say, okay, let's say imagine it was Yorkshire. The Yorkshire Labour Party were against this. Imagine they were doing it. Wouldn't be so bad, but the thing is, these people are MSPs. That's the problem. They're MSPs, and they have the potential to get power in Scotland. And Scotland is a different issue from what's going on in England. So they really need to be much more careful about the long-term goals in this case. Right.
Well, it would have been a good. I know you're trying to finish up here.
No, fine.
It would have been easy for Sarwar just to kind of say, okay, well, the UK party has adopted, this policy, and then he could just have kind of hidden behind that.
Yeah, of course. It's
to
easy.
Get away from it. He didn't, he doesn't have to speak out against it.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Right. Okay. We'd like to thank you for watching the show. If you like what you do and would like to support the show, please consider leaving a super thanks or super sticker on YouTube, or go to our website and pledge a one-time or monthly donation. Everything you donate, small or large, helps us in our mission to fight against toxic nationalism and to amplify your voice against the nationalists in Scotland.
The politicians are not listening to the people, but the majority is listening to the people.
Well, the majority is trying to its best to listen to the majority of our followers anyway, and trying to say what's going on here. We hope to have some kind of common sense injection into this here and say, okay, why are you meddling with stuff? Why are you doing this? Really? Leave us alone a bit. So a bit of that. I'll come back to that later. Right, we're back in a few seconds where Mary will be telling Patrick Harvie to go and boil his head.
Away and boil your head.
Oh, well, okay. Very good. Okay. You're up.
Okay, well, Scottish homeowners are boiling over.
Oh, very good.
This week, homeowners in Scotland are at boiling point, and no wonder. First up, Patrick Harvie is planning to penalise millions of Scottish homeowners for just for having a gas boiler. Do you want?
It's just ridiculous nonsense.
Yeah, I know. I honestly, before I go any further, I really believe that they must be sitting around in the green conference room or whatever they've got, their lunchroom, trying to think up things just to really, what could we do that would really, really make things bad for Scottish people? And I think that's what they come up with. But anyway, Patrick Harvie is planning to penalise millions of homeowners for the gas boilers. He wants to overhaul the Energy Proficiency Certificate, which everyone knows is the EPC, that all houses have to have to reduce the value of houses with a fossil fuel boiler, which to us is a gas or an oil boiler. So it would mean that the value of your home would actually be reduced. And this would be coming into effect. It's only 2 years away, like 2025 is when they're. So people don't have a lot of time. Well, that's his plan. That's what he would like to see. So any homeowners that didn't have a C rating, which is really high, I would imagine most houses in Scotland probably have like a D or an E or whatever. You would only be able to get the C rating if you had a heat pump system. So this is the famous heat pumps that everyone's going on about. And you wouldn't be able to sell your home without a C rating.
Right.
So just to make that very clear, the only way to get a C rating for your home would be to have a heat pump system. You wouldn't be able to get it with a gas boiler or oil boiler or anything else. And if you don't have that C rating, you wouldn't be able to sell your house, which is absolutely ridiculous. So, I mean, that basically homeowners would be crippled unless they stump up. It takes about at least £10,000, I think.
Well, you have to buy the pump. You have to buy new radiators. You have to buy a whole load of other stuff.
It's a whole system. I mean, it goes all through the house. So
I think it's between £5,000 and £10,000.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the size of your house. I would guess.
This is never going to happen. It's never. The policy is never going to work.
I would agree. I don't think it'll ever go into practice.
I think it'll be challenged in court.
Yes, I think so as well.
But the problem with all these kind of things that they keep dreaming up, like the DRS system, or didn't they have the alarms, the interconnected alarms and everything? And people are having to spend a fortune to try and, meet the eligibility for all of these things. And then they get dumped. The system, these ideas and plans get dumped, and people have they've put out a fortune trying to comply with all of these things. So it's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, Grumpy says they were quoted to over £12,000 there.
And
the crazy thing is, Patrick Harvie, by all accounts, from what I've heard, has got a gas boiler.
And he said he's not going to replace it.
And he's not going to replace it because he lives in a tenement.
You can't do anything with. You can't retrofit tenements easily with that type of thing. We use those heat pumps in America and in Japan. And the reason we use them is they can run as air conditioning as well. That's the main reason for them. But it takes ages to heat up a room in them. And what you have is a wee slot where the air comes out and pushes air out to you. It doesn't work. It's not that efficient. Radiators hot. The room's hot.
And it's fine if you're sitting underneath the little thing that you're talking about, Mark. But if you're sitting away from it, you're either too cold, you're too hot. Yes. And you're always playing with it to up and down and open the vents and close the vents. And the other thing is they're really ugly. So outside your house, you usually have to have a big system outside the house. And at the last house we lived in America, we had two. We had to have one at each side of the house.
Oh,
and
yes. And they make a terrible noise.
they're really noisy.
Racket.
They're horrible. And you have to have them maintained all the time. I mean, I know gas boilers need a little bit of maintenance, but I mean, this is a big chunk of machinery.
There's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that have gas boilers as well. So how many people is it going to affect? And are they going to get help from the government? I don't think they will. You know, I don't think there's any.
Well, but
we're not hearing about that.
That doesn't help it anyway. So what you're going to get spend a fortune in taxpayers' money to do this thing, and when there's other priorities, you know, people. You know, there's other priorities out there other than this green agenda. Now, someone in here said, "Well, the planet's burning and all that." You know, the planet burns all the time. If you actually look statistically at these number of fires there aren't any more fires than before. And you know, it's not like the sun beats down and suddenly, there's a fire. And we found out that most of these fires in Europe are actually set by arsonists.
Yeah, and that's what happened in Greece.
And this happened in Canada as well. They were going all these Canadian wildfires, terrible. It turned out it was arsonists, and also it was, as I said, it wasn't any different. You look at the graph. In fact, they go down because there's more management. In fact, or they go up because when in areas where the fire isn't managed, because Greens want forests to go unmanaged.
Well, I'll be talking about that a little bit later.
Yes.
But you know, as the song goes, it was always burning since the world was turning.
Oh yes, very good.
But the reason why Patrick Harvie wants to do this with just because he's a nutter, but apart from that, the SNP and the Greens, they want to cut Scotland's carbon emissions by 75% by 2030 and force Scotland to reach a so-called net zero by 2045, which would be 5 years ahead of the rest of the UK.
Oh, of course.
Why do we have to do everything years ahead?
This is the thing that I always say about these things. It's like, why do we need to be world leading? Why does Scotland need to be world leading? Because world leading is expensive. It's incredible.
It means that we're the idiots who get it wrong first, and then everyone else learns from us.
So it's like world leading. What world leading bicycle lanes? Well, right, we spent a fortune in that, and what about the drug deaths? We've got world leading drug deaths. These are choices we need to make. There are political choices to be made, and the Greens would have us make these choices that are basically anti-human, anti-people. You know, money for insulating homes and all this nonsense. Okay, it's great when you can afford it, but right now, people are needing. So the cost of living crisis. People need bread on the table, food on the table, I should say, and they need to. If some people need help, that's where the money should go. Money should go to the drug desk, but they don't care about that at all. They just want to virtue signal that they're saving the planet and they're good people. They're not good people. Really,
net zero doesn't even exist.
No, it's not.
You can't get to net zero. It's basically impossible to get to net zero. So
right,
it's just another. I just don't know. They cut down 16 million trees.
60 million, I thought. 60 million?
Millions of trees.
16, I'm not sure.
I mean, I think it was just.
How green is that?
It's just incredible waste of money, and people are waking up to it. I think now we've seen in the past few weeks, certainly, even while these they're trying to. In fact, I think it's a direct result of the climate hysteria that people are saying, "Well, come on, this is nonsense. We've had hot weather. You look at the weather results from, and trying to say stuff in the States. It was the warmest ever, and then you go back and to 1850, and it was warmer. So when there was no CO2 in the atmosphere, but obviously not as much. Not as much.
I think there was plenty CO2
not as
in
much
the atmosphere.
Industrial. CO2 in the atmosphere and so on. So it's just it's really, I think people are beginning to see that it's not really what the priority they want to be spending their time on. Want a better health service? Well, you can't have that. Of course, it's going to all your money's gone into windmills, subsidies, right? So stuff like that.
Well, I think with the boilers, we're at the point where, like, the boiler we have in our house, it's a small boiler. It looks very efficient. It sits in a small, very small space. But if people have to start getting these big chunks of machinery outside your house and on your balconies and places like that, I mean, it's just an absolute waste of money. And we're all happy with the little boilers that we've got now. Nobody wants to change that.
I still don't think it's going to happen, personally. I think it'll just be
I hope you're right, Mark.
Policies
I hope you're right.
It'll get challenged and it'll get abandoned again.
But in the meantime, a lot of homeowners are having to go through the worry. If
Yeah.
you're, I mean, there might be people, for example, who they're thinking, oh, I'll probably sell the house in about 3 years. And now they're thinking, oh, wait a minute, in 3 years, this new law is going to be, there's a big risk that this new law could be put in place. So
I think it's going to worry a lot
should
of
I sell my
pensions.
house? Should I sell my house now? Should I sell it within a year before this comes in? There could be a lot of that going on, and it's completely unnecessary. All the trauma that we all have to go through is completely unnecessary about bottle deposit return schemes and all these things.
And it will be another court case that the Scottish government are going to have to go and defend, and how much is that going to cost?
And here, I just want to address something this guy, David Daniels, who says, well, have you any evidence that there fires started by arsonists? Yes, of course. All over Google, look at anywhere here. Officials claim fires in Corfu started by arsonists. There's loads of claims. There's a guy on who's I was reading today about the guy who set up the Yellowstone, fires as well.
Yeah.
And, and that one caused 100 houses to be burned down. And basically they're going to put them away for life. It's quite a common thing that happens. I don't know if it's necessarily related to that they're climate warriors and in there setting the fires. It's just a bunch of nutters out there.
I think people always set fires in all these places. The problem is that when the weather is hotter and drier, that the fires take hold and they spread much more.
Yes.
So if you do happen to have hotter, drier weather for a while, then any wildfires, which are a normal occurrence, will be much worse. More. But, I mean, they're set off in the first place by arsonists.
Yes. Well, anyway, moving on, Mary.
Well, the next thing, as if that wasn't bad enough for homeowners, the next thing we found out this week was that some Scottish houses or households are being charged the same council tax as English mansions worth 10 times more.
Oh, jeez.
So, for example, for your council tax band, let's say tax band D, a tax band D house in England can be worth 10 times more than a band D house in Scotland. So, because I'd looked before actually, and if you look at your, I'm paying, say I live in a band D and I'm paying this so much. Oh, I wonder what people in the rest of the UK are paying. And you think, oh, well, people in band D down in England or Wales or whatever, they're paying, the same as me. But what you don't know is that a band D house down in England or Wales or the rest of the UK is actually worth 10 times more. So, for example, a 4-bedroom detached property in Uddingston, in South Lanarkshire, we all know who lives there. At the moment, there's a 4-bedroom detached property in Uddingston. That's quite big, but it's being sold at offers over £320,000. It's band F, and the council tax bill is just over £3,000. But in Hampshire, a picturesque Grade 3 listed cottage in Sopley, sitting in 2 acres of grounds, is also in band F, but valued at £1.5 million. So you've got in Scotland, you've got your £320,000 house, which has the equivalent council tax of a £1.5 million mansion in Hampshire. I've got the same council tax. Now, in Scotland, it's a little bit different that we don't have to pay water bills, but your water bills are only a few £100s a year down in England. So it doesn't, make the total difference. In West Lothian, if you've got a house at £425,000, which would be in band G, but in West Sussex, a band G house is £4 million. So it's a 10 times disparity between Scotland. So when we're told, but people in Scotland pay less council tax than, people in the rest of the UK, it's absolute nonsense. It's like we're paying huge council tax for small houses. And people in the rest of the UK are paying the same as what we're paying, but the houses are maybe 10 times, they're worth 10 times more. So it's ridiculous. And now we've got the SNP are talking about adding up to 22% onto council tax bills. So taking an already bad situation, and I didn't know any of this, so I'm quite appalled, but they're going to make it even worse with these council tax hikes that they're planning to put in.
Well, they're just trying to soak everyone, right? Isn't it? I mean, I think they they don't have enough. They put all the money into their pet projects, but they don't have any financial management at all. They put all the money into their pet projects, and then there's nothing left for the rest. And they go, "Oh, how can we make this up? Oh, we'll tax the rich. We'll tax," but it's not the rich they're taxing. It's ordinary working people, the working class people that are targeting. I mean, this thing with to go back to the boilers, it's middle class folk who can afford this stuff and go, "Oh yes, I'd like to be in my eco-conscious home." And normal people are like, well, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to get food on the table for my family.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to be able to get by. And they're like, no, of course you have to have an eco-conscious boiler and a heat pump. This is the latest technology.
Scotland has to be leading the world.
Yes, and I'll repeat my thing that I say almost every week now. I do think that a lot of these policies are being pushed by lobbyists from, in this case, manufacturers of heat pumps. It wouldn't surprise me at all that you're putting a lot of money into governments and saying, okay, this is what we need to be doing. So you support this. It's really really very poor behaviour. And this idea of just trying to soak people for whatever they can get, and just ridiculous plans. Today they were talking about, do you see that one, Mary, about the £1,000 for every passenger in a private jet they were going to charge?
Oh, is it Patrick Harvie's latest one?
I hope
every person arriving in a private jet is going to be charged £1,000. So guess what's going to happen then? People won't be arriving, and
rich folk won't be coming here and spending their money.
Well,
That's what will happen.
Those people who arrive in private jets, they're where are they going? They're going to places like maybe St Andrews. They're staying in a big fancy hotel. They're paying a lot of money for that to the hotel. They're buying things in all the shops round about. They're paying for their golf. They're taking
the economy. They're going to destroy the economy.
But they don't care. They don't. That's the thing, is they don't care that they destroy the economy. Yeah. They actually don't.
They're against economic growth.
That's what it comes down to in the end. It's a fundamentally anti-human prospect. This idea that this we've all got to suffer because some middle class folk think that working people are too poor and dirty. That's really what it is. And it's tiresome because at a certain point the working people go, no, we're not dealing with this anymore. Get to, as it says here as well. And so it's really.
And you look at the councils. This is due to years and years and years of budget cuts, and they've cut it to the bone. So now we're facing extremely high bills of 22% because the councils just can't survive. They can't survive like this. The budget is so cut such to the bone that they just can't. They're having. Some councils are having to do this. I've heard Glasgow is running out of money.
It's terrible. Yeah, it's really bad.
Yeah,
it's really bad. But I think that's what Grumpy Git said there. Independence, not that one, the other one. That basically they want to. Basically they'll say, if we run out of money, then they say, "Oh, Westminster doesn't give enough money. We need to be independent." Can you imagine it'd be even worse? Even worse, they'd be spending up all their money to try and get everyone with heat pumps or whatever it was to fulfill some kind of global agenda for climate change. That Scotland's only responsible for 0.1% of emissions, if that, in the world. Meanwhile, China and India are polluting like crazy. And sorry, that's back to that.
Well, Nicola Marshbank says they are Marxist technocrats who hate people who don't think the same as them.
No, that's really very true.
But yet we've still got Angus Robertson with £350 million budget. And his was the only department that didn't go down.
Yes, exactly.
And the councils need that money.
Well, this is the case, like as I said, for direct funding of councils, and I think one of the things that should be considered is for councils to basically say we'll have a referendum and opting out of Scottish Parliament control. That's what we want to do. We want to go back to Westminster and get funded directly, and and get the money from there instead of it being diverted to the Greens' priorities or to the SNP's priorities, which are not our local priorities, which are keeping our libraries, swimming pools, teachers, and so on going.
Absolutely.
Right. That's really what we should be doing. Right. Okay. Very good. Good segment there, Mary. Vigorous discussion and on the comments as well. Where are we? So, things you can do right now to support the show. You can hit the like button. That's the thing we want you to do. Hit the like button wherever you are. Hit that, because then, of course, that shares it out amongst your friends. Of course, you can also tell your friends. Which is great. There's an amazing show called Majority Show every week at 7 p.m. live. And so you won't hear anything like this anywhere else. Good stuff. You can also subscribe to the show on YouTube, buy a t-shirt or a mug. Look at that. Beautiful. These are nice t-shirts. And you can do all of the above, which makes us very happy. Coming up, it's the moment you've all been waiting for. It is the highlight of the week. It is Zoomer of the Week.
Yay.
Oh, take a breath after all that. Okay, so my nomination for Zoomer of the Week is Vladimir Solyvyov.
And who is Vladimir Solyvyov, Mark?
Well, he's a presenter on Russian state TV. He thought he would weigh in on our constitutional issues in Scotland.
Okay.
Let's see, he said, let's have a look at it first of all.
Ирландия свободна. Кстати, Шотландия должна быть свободна.
By the way, Scotland should be free.
Scottish brothers, you have to fight for your freedom.
Well, it's very short, but you heard his dodgy accent. Here, let's do that one again. We'll try that again.
Ирландия свободна. Кстати, Шотландия должна быть свободна. Еще раз скажу, Scottish brothers, you have to fight for your freedom.
Okay, I wonder if you learned that Scottish accent from Alex Salmond, who was previously in Putin's payroll as an RT presenter. Solyvyov, so excuse me, my Russian isn't that great, has repeatedly called for Russia to escalate the war in Ukraine with nuclear strikes. In January 2023, he said that life is highly overrated.
What?
Well, perhaps that may be true, and urged Russians not to fear death, saying, "Why be afraid of what is inevitable? We'll go to heaven." And to which I would say, "You go first." He's one of these. You get these people who say, "Oh yeah, we think we should depopulate the planet, for green whatever." You're like, "Oh okay, go ahead. We'll wait and watch. Why don't you?" Anyway, he's also called for Russia to launch false flag terror attacks against France and Britain. So he's an all-round nice guy. And by the way, Mark, did you notice that you weren't free? When none of us, he says, what did he say? He said you have to fight for your freedom. What free to fight for your freedom? But I remember in 2014, Scottish independence referendum, when the majority of Scots overwhelmingly freely voted to remain part of the UK. Scottish Conservative Shadow Secretary for the Constitution, External Affairs and Culture. Why are these titles so long now? Can I just make it shorter? Donald Cameron said there's a reason why Putin's broadcasting mouthpiece supports Scottish independence, because it recognises that breaking up the UK would make all its constituent nations weaker. And George Folks shared the clip with the message, Putin favours Sexit. Mm-hmm. This exposes the basic lie of Scottish nationalists. It's not Scottish independence, it's the breakup of the UK, and that is a matter that concerns every UK citizen. Mark, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, a Russian talking about freedom.
Okay,
it just, that says everything, doesn't it? These people, like you say, they're just trying to break up the UK. They're trying to cause trouble between, to stoke up, to try and get people to fight, to be
divisive.
Yeah, just divide us.
They want to weaken. They know the UK is the stronghold of Europe, and they want to weaken Europe. So if they want to weaken Europe, they weaken the UK, because we're the strongest country. We're militarily, we're the strongest country in Europe, and they know they need to break up the UK. So that this is where all this propaganda nonsense comes from. And I haven't seen any SNP come out against it and say it was wrong, have you? You've not really heard from them about this.
No, it's a part of their thing, actually. I mean, well before we started the majority, in fact, on the eve of the referendum, I wrote an article. It's called "If Scotland Votes Yes," which was an alternative history of what would happen if Scotland voted yes. Thankfully, of course, we didn't do that. But what it basically said was that to fund all this nonsense, the country would basically go bankrupt. Everyone who has any idea of how to make money would leave straight away. There's no oil money anymore. So to fund all this deficit that we have each year, they would inevitably have to go to the international markets. And international markets aren't going to give them any money. And guess who, of course, would give them money. It would be Russia and China. And if you think that that's like an edge case or something like that, let's have a listen to Professor Mark Blythe, who is a favoured economist of the SNP. And this in this clip, which you may not be, he mumbles a bit in it, but basically he talks about you frightening the UK government into with this threat of getting China and into Scottish politics.
Well, you don't see a role for others. I wouldn't accept Russian rubles, but what about the Chinese? If they said, we were very much like a naval base in the North Atlantic.
Well, not even the naval base. I mean, basically, if you just went to them into the Belt and Road Initiative and the Asian Development Bank and said, all right, really, 2 small cities that have already got pretty good communications infrastructure, how about you build the 5G? Well, that's Huawei, so that's a security risk for everybody in the West, right? But you could do that. How about you rebuild our port infrastructure for us and you give us a big loan to do it? To do that is a rounding error on their balance sheet. It's a tiny amount of money. And it gets them right into a strategic position. So you could use the threat of doing that as a way of getting what you want. Alternatively, you could just go to them and say, well, how about we just do this with China because you don't want to play ball? The point is Scotland has options that people don't think about. The question is whether they have, if you will, the wherewithal or desire to follow through on those options.
Right. So basically what he's saying is he as an economist for the SNP, is recommending that the Scottish government, in this case, basically gets China into uses the threat of getting loans from China, and the threat of a base, which they talk about, in the North Atlantic for China, to get independence. It's just absolute insanity. And this
isn't that treason?
Well, I don't know if that's that, but it's insanity anyway. This whole idea, and we don't think about this enough. As I said earlier, the idea that it's not Scottish independence; it's the breakup of the UK. It's a breakup of the UK's military integrity as well, and that means giving bases ultimately to the people. You see countries like Croatia and so on, they're beholden to Chinese loans, and China just says, all right, okay, well, you're not paid your money, give us access to other stuff. That's not good.
It weakens Europe. If you weaken the UK, you weaken Europe, and that's the whole objective of these people, is to weaken Europe.
Yes, definitely. Anyway, in that article I wrote, as the joke goes, what's the difference between Scotland and Venezuela? 5 years.
Yeah.
Anyway, if you try to stir the pot, Vladimir, both of them, gets my nomination. All right. So I went on a bit longer, but all right, back with another one in just a moment. Right, Mark, you're up.
Mine's Neil Gray. He's the Cabinet Secretary for Wellbeing and the Economy.
Right.
A report's come out that his area, it's the worst hit area in the UK. It's Airdrie and Shotts. 40% of his constituency are on benefits and have never worked. Now,
yeah, there's not a lot of industry around there.
No, and his excuse, Thatcher's fault.
Yeah.
Margaret Thatcher's fault. She resigned office 33 years ago, and they're still blaming Thatcher for something.
Well, wasn't there a Labour government in between then, maybe for 18 years or something like that?
Yeah, it's absolutely. I find it absolutely astonishing that they can still blame someone from 33 years ago for people being on benefits in his area, 40%. And there's 150,000 people in Scotland of working age that have never had a job or even looked for a job. 150,000. That can't be right. That can't be sustained. That's not sustainable.
Well, it's not to even mention that, of course, I mentioned Labour there, but it's not in the intervening years. But SNP. Basically, they've had the SNP in charge of Scotland all that 14 years, the past 14 years, 15 years, right? Anyway, as well. But Mark, I was wondering if you'd heard of the Scottish national holiday of Milkmas.
No.
It's because every year the ghost of Margaret Thatcher returns to Scotland, and if you paint an SNP logo on your door, all the milk in your house. If you don't paint an SNP logo on your door, all the milk in your house will disappear. snatched
It'll
by
turn. The milk will turn.
yes, by Thatcher, the milk snatcher. Yes, that's it. So you're learning there.
It's absolutely. I just find it, and the strange thing is people actually believe it still. I had it on Twitter. People constantly saying, "I'm still suffering from when Thatcher was the prime minister."
I mean, you can say, okay,
even born.
well, you can say, okay, Ravenscraig and all the steelworks were closed down. Fair enough, right? But
and that was a hard blow, but there's been plenty of time.
I mean, it's been a long time since then, and surely it would be a priority to get to help those people. This is what I'm saying. They'd rather talk about bike lanes and gender and other stuff, people flying their private jets, and actually help these people by providing jobs for them. Because all the people who try to provide jobs are, heading for the exits.
Well, when you look at it, we've had 16 years of the SNP who have absolutely they've done more damage in 16 years than Thatcher ever did. To the economy, to industries, to all the way through to education. Look at education was one of the best in the world when Thatcher was prime minister in Scotland, and now look at it. It's an absolute disaster. So whose fault was that? You can't blame Thatcher because we were the best, one of the best educational systems in the world.
Nonsense.
So whose fault was that? And look at the NHS. The time where you start blaming someone who's from 33 years ago, you're struggling if that's
it's just like the bogeyman, it's cartoon villain politics. It's a sense Scooby-Doo to unmask the real villain.
But as you said, Mark, I mean, what they've done is they've passed it on from generation to generation. I mean, I've got personal experience of that. I've seen that. It's like the fathers pass it on to the sons.
Yeah.
And they'll pass it on to their sons, and they'll still be talking about Thatcher in another 33 years.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Our welfare system needs a good look at, because it's not sustainable as it is. It really isn't. They need to do something about them, and that goes to Westminster as well. It needs the whole of the UK welfare system needs re-examined, and because it's not sustainable.
Well, if it took far too much concentration on not growth, the opposite of growth, anti-growth. It's like we need to get some politicians in there who are like, let's grow. We need growth. We need jobs. We ever hear them say that? No, we don't hear that. That's a great segment.
People are saying I'm better off on benefits.
Yeah,
I don't want to get a job because I'm better off on benefits. It shouldn't be that way round. It should always work better for people working than they are on benefits.
Absolutely, Mark.
Absolutely, Mark. So that's Neil Gray from Mark there. Next up, it's going to be Mary Zoomer. We're running a little bit long, but hopefully you will stay with us just for a few more minutes.
Well, we were talking earlier about the wildfires in Europe, particularly in Rhodes and around southern Europe. And our daughter is actually in Sicily at the moment. Yesterday, she sent us a video of raging flames only a few 100 meters from her boat. And she said that she could feel the heat from the flames was really, really strong. So I have every sympathy for all the families who've had to flee and return home early from their well-earned holidays, and for all the families and businesses who have lost so much, to these fires. I mean, it's a terrible, terrible thing. But who I don't have any sympathy for is my Zoomer of the week, grievance granny herself, Ruth Wishart. She is trying to make hay from the terrible ongoing tragedies unfolding across Europe. Ruth, this week, Ruth tweeted, "Hope all the ULEZ critics are watching the enforced evacuation from Rhodes. We are on the brink, peeps." Now, I've heard a lot of guff from climate alarmists in my time, but I think that really takes the biscuit. She's basically insinuating that people who don't think the ULEZ scheme is a good idea in Glasgow, mainly because it bans up to 20% of drivers from taking their cars into the city centres and contribute to the decline of the city. She's basically saying that these people, when they see all these people fleeing from Rhodes, they're going to be sorry, and that somehow the ULEZ system in Glasgow or London, as it might be, is related to the wildfires on the Greek islands.
Effect. Mick Butterfly effect. That's what it is. But
A little Scottish
the US
butterfly.
isn't actually for global warming, it's for air quality. So global
Hey,
warming,
I didn't say it.
well, global warming's about CO2, and if that was the case, our car would get in, right? Because it's low emissions.
Yeah.
But in fact, it's nitrous oxygen, nitrous dioxide
or something.
Like
Well, this is the biggest stretch that I've ever heard of. They're blaming the people who don't like ULEZ are going to be sorry when they see all the wildfires in Greece. So anyway, I'm throwing a bucket of water on Ruth's wildfire alarmism, and voting her my Zoomer of the week.
Oh, very good there. Rita thinks that you should win, Mary. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, because Mark is going to decide.
I'm going to go with Mary. I'm going to go with Ruth.
All right, there we go.
Right, I just have to get wait now. Hold on, I have to type
a big win for Mary there.
Yay! Thank
with
you.
Grievance Granny linking the ULEZ.
It's just ridiculous. I mean,
they never give up. But that's the thing, really. And of course, while all this global warming is going on, we are sitting here in the rain. And we could do with more global warming in Scotland, please. Thank you. Burn as much coal as you like. We would like an extra couple of degrees up here, please. Right, anyway, thank you for being with us on the show tonight. It's been fun as usual. Thank you for being with us.
And thank you for all your comments.
Okay, I'm going to leave you with the thought of the week. If politicians are the problem, why do we keep electing them? Wouldn't it be great if we could all get arrests from their tiresome meddling for a few weeks at least? Put it on the ballot paper. Give us a rest.
Just get rid of politicians altogether.
Well, I mean,
good idea, Mark.
It certainly feels a bit like that at the moment. Anyway, we're so happy to have you on the show with us every week. Tune in next Wednesday for more discussions on Scotland's #1 politics chat. That's a good night from me.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Right. Okay. And I'll have to find the bit where we go back. All right. So take care.